Margaret Chen had owned Sunrise Bakery for 15 years, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. Every morning at exactly 7:30, a thin girl with tangled brown hair would appear outside her window, pressing her face against the glass as customers enjoyed fresh pastries and steaming coffee. The girl never came inside, never asked for anything, just watched with eyes that seemed far too old for her small frame. Margaret had tried waving, even stepping outside once or twice, but the girl would disappear like morning mist the moment she sensed attention. What Margaret didn't know was that this quiet observer was collecting something more precious than money, something that would soon reveal a truth so heartbreaking it would transform not just two lives, but an entire community. The girl's secret wasn't what anyone expected, and when Margaret finally discovered it, her response would prove that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest miracles. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The first time Margaret noticed her, it was a Tuesday morning in late September. The autumn air carried the scent of cinnamon and vanilla from the bakery's ovens, mixing with the crisp promise of changing seasons. Margaret was arranging a fresh batch of apple turnovers in the display case when movement outside caught her eye. There, pressed against the large front window like a small ghost, was a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her clothes hung loose on her tiny frame, a faded pink sweater that had seen better days pulled tight around narrow shoulders. Her brown hair, streaked with lighter strands from too much sun and not enough care, fell in uneven waves around a face that was all sharp angles and hollow cheeks. But it was her eyes that stopped Margaret cold, large brown eyes that held a hunger deeper than anything food could satisfy. The girl's breath fogged the glass as she watched Mrs. Patterson from down the street bite into a chocolate croissant. Margaret could see the child's throat move as she swallowed, as if she were tasting the pastry herself through sheer will. When Mrs. Patterson finished and left, dropping a few crumbs on the small table by the window, the girl's gaze followed those tiny fragments like they were diamonds. Margaret set down the tray she was holding and moved toward the door, but by the time she reached it, the girl had vanished. She stepped outside and looked both ways down Maple Street, but there was no sign of the mysterious visitor. Only the faint outline of small handprints remained on her window, like evidence of a haunting. "Did you see where that little girl went?" Margaret asked Joe Martinez, who was sweeping the sidewalk in front of his hardware store next door. Joe paused and leaned on his broom. "What little girl? I've been out here for 20 minutes and haven't seen any kids." Margaret frowned and looked back at her window. The handprints were already fading in the morning warmth. "Never mind, must have been my imagination." But it wasn't her imagination, because the girl returned the next morning at the same time. In the morning after that. By the end of the week, Margaret found herself arriving at the bakery earlier than usual, preparing the display cases with extra care, somehow hoping to catch another glimpse of her mysterious observer. The girl had developed a routine. She would appear just as the morning rush began, positioning herself at different spots along the window depending on where customers were sitting. She seemed to have memorized every regular customer's preferences. When elderly Mr. Peterson came in for his daily bran muffin and black coffee, she would move to the left side of the window. When the young mother with twin toddlers arrived for her chai latte and blueberry scone, the girl would shift to the right, watching as the woman broke off pieces for her children. What fascinated Margaret most was how the girl never seemed to focus on the food itself, but rather on the act of eating. She watched faces light up at first bites, observed the satisfied sighs that followed sips of hot coffee, studied the way people's shoulders relaxed as they settled into the comfort of warm pastries and friendly conversation. It was as if she were memorizing happiness itself. On the 8th day, Margaret tried a different approach. Instead of going to the door when she spotted the girl, she simply waved from behind the counter. The girl's eyes widened, and she took a half step back. But she didn't run. Margaret smiled and pointed to a tray of fresh cookies, then made an exaggerated gesture of tasting one and rubbing her stomach. The girl's lips twitched, almost forming a smile, before she pressed them into a thin line and looked away. Progress, Margaret thought. Small, but progress nonetheless. The weather grew colder as October deepened, and Margaret noticed the girl's sweater wasn't nearly warm enough for the morning chill. She began leaving the bakery's heater on higher than usual, hoping some warmth would seep through the windows. She also started positioning the most aromatic items closer to the glass, fresh cinnamon rolls and herb bread that would fill the air outside with enticing scents. It was during the third week of October that Margaret first noticed the girl collecting things. At first, she thought the child was just fidgeting, her small hands moving restlessly as she watched customers. But then Margaret realized the girl was gathering crumbs from the sidewalk, carefully picking up the tiniest fragments that customers had dropped while walking to their cars. The sight made Margaret's chest tighten. She watched as the girl found a piece of muffin that had fallen from someone's napkin, examining it carefully before wrapping it in what looked like a small piece of cloth and tucking it into her pocket. The girl's movements were precise and practiced, suggesting this wasn't the first time she'd done such a thing. Margaret's mind raced. Was the girl homeless? Hungry? Where were her parents? She made a mental note to call the school district and see if any children had been reported missing, though something told her this girl's absence wouldn't be noticed by official channels. The next morning, Margaret was ready. She had prepared a small bag with a warm blueberry muffin, a carton of milk, and a packet of crackers. She placed it just inside the door, planning to offer it to the girl the moment she appeared. But when 7:30 came and went, with no sign of her visitor, Margaret felt a stab of worry. Had she scared the girl away somehow? Had someone else noticed and frightened her off? Margaret found herself checking the window every few minutes throughout the morning, but there was no small face pressed against the glass, no tiny hands leaving prints on the surface. The girl was absent for 3 days, and Margaret found herself more affected by her disappearance than she had expected. She'd grown accustomed to their strange, silent morning ritual, and the bakery felt oddly empty without her mysterious observer. Margaret caught herself saving the nicest pastries for the front display, just in case the girl returned. On Thursday morning, Margaret was refilling the coffee urns when she heard a soft tapping on the window. She turned to see the girl back in her usual spot, but something was different. The child looked even thinner than before, if that were possible, and there was a grayish tinge to her skin that spoke of exhaustion and hunger. This time, Margaret didn't hesitate. She grabbed the bag of food she had kept ready and walked straight to the door. The girl's eyes went wide as Margaret stepped outside, but instead of running, she froze like a deer caught in headlights. "Hello there," Margaret said softly, crouching down to make herself less intimidating. "I'm Margaret. I own this bakery." The girl's gaze darted between Margaret's face and the bag in her hands. Up close, Margaret could see that the child's lips were chapped, and there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "I've seen you watching through my window," Margaret continued, her voice gentle. "I thought you might be hungry." She held out the bag, and after a moment's hesitation, the girl reached for it with hands that trembled slightly. Margaret noticed the child's fingernails were bitten down to the quick, and her knuckles were scraped, as if she'd been sleeping rough. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl clutched the bag against her chest and took a small step backward. For a moment, Margaret thought she would run without answering. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Lucy." "Lucy, that's a beautiful name." Margaret smiled. "Are you hungry, Lucy?" The girl nodded, then seemed to catch herself and shook her head quickly. "Not for me," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's for my brother. He's little, and he gets so hungry, and I can't always find enough. And sometimes he cries at night because his tummy hurts, and I try to find things, but people don't drop very much, and what they do drop isn't, quote, always good and—" She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she had said too much. Margaret felt her heart crack open at the desperation in the child's voice. "How old is your brother, Lucy?" "4. His name is Danny, and he's really good most of the time, but sometimes he gets scared when I have to leave him alone to look for food and I tell him I'll come back, but I think he worries that maybe someday I won't, and then what would happen to him because there's nobody else and—" Again, she stopped herself, biting her lower lip hard enough to leave marks. Margaret's throat felt tight. "Where are your parents, honey?" Lucy's face closed off completely. "We don't have any. It's just me and Danny." The words hung in the morning air like a physical weight. Margaret looked at this thin, serious child who was trying to care for an even smaller child, collecting crumbs from sidewalks to keep her brother from starving, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. "Lucy," she said carefully, "would you like to bring Danny here? I have more food inside, warm food. And it's getting cold out here." Lucy's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. "We can't pay for it. I don't have any money." "You don't need money, sweetheart. I have plenty of food, and it makes me happy to share it." Lucy stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was some kind of trick. Finally, she nodded slowly. "He's just around the corner. I told him to wait by the big tree, because sometimes people get mad when they see kids alone, and they ask questions, and we can't answer questions because then they might take us away from each other, and that's the worst thing that could happen, because we're all we have left, and—" "It's okay," Margaret said gently. "Go get Danny. I'll wait right here." Lucy turned and ran, her thin legs carrying her around the corner of the building faster than Margaret would have thought possible. Within minutes, she returned leading a small boy by the hand. Danny was even thinner than his sister, with the same brown hair and large eyes. But where Lucy's gaze was wary and old beyond her years, Danny's held a trust that nearly broke Margaret's heart. "This is my brother," Lucy said, her voice fierce with protective pride. "Danny, this is the nice lady I told you about. The one who owns the bakery." Danny looked up at Margaret with curious eyes. "Are you the one who makes the food smell so good?" Margaret smiled. "I am. Would you like to try some?" Danny's face lit up, but he looked to his sister for permission. Lucy hesitated, then nodded. Margaret led them both inside the warm bakery, acutely aware of how they stayed close together, Lucy's hand never leaving her brother's shoulder. The smell of fresh bread and pastries seemed to overwhelm them both. Danny's stomach growled audibly, and he pressed his free hand against it with an embarrassed look. Lucy's face flushed red. "Sorry," she whispered. "We didn't eat yesterday because I couldn't find very much, and I gave it all to Danny, and—" "There's nothing to apologize for," Margaret said firmly. She guided them to a small table in the back corner, away from the view of other customers. "Now, what would you like to try first?" She brought them warm milk, fresh bread with butter and jam, scrambled eggs that were still steaming, and slices of apple that she cut into perfect wedges. She watched as Danny's eyes grew huge at the spread before him, and as Lucy had to swallow hard before she could speak. "This is too much," Lucy said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Nonsense. I made too much anyway, and it'll just go to waste if nobody eats it." It was a lie, of course. Margaret had specifically prepared extra food the moment she decided to bring them inside. But she sensed that Lucy's pride would make it difficult for her to accept charity. And sometimes, a small deception was kinder than the truth. Danny ate with the focused intensity of someone who wasn't sure when his next meal would come. Lucy ate more slowly, savoring each bite, as if trying to memorize the taste. Margaret busied herself with other tasks, giving them privacy while keeping a watchful eye to make sure they had everything they needed. When they had finished, both children looked better. Color had returned to their cheeks, and some of the tension had left Lucy's shoulders. Danny was practically glowing with contentment. "Thank you," Lucy said, her voice thick with emotion. "That was the best food we've ever had." "You're very welcome. And I hope you'll come back tomorrow morning." Lucy's eyes widened. "Really? You want us to come back? I'd be hurt if you didn't. I open at 6, but I'm usually here by 5:30 getting things ready. If you come to the back door, I'll let you in, and you can help me prepare for the day. Danny too, if he'd like." Danny bounced in his seat. "Can we, Lucy? Can we come help?" Lucy looked at Margaret with an expression of wonder mixed with disbelief. "You really mean it? You're not just being nice?" "I mean it completely. In fact, I could use the help. It gets lonely here in the mornings before customers arrive." It was another small lie, the one that served a greater truth. Margaret had never felt lonely in her bakery before. But she knew these children needed purpose, as much as they needed food. Giving them a way to earn what they received would help preserve Lucy's dignity, while ensuring they got what they required to survive. That night, Margaret lay awake thinking about the two children. She knew there were proper channels she should go through, official agencies that dealt with homeless and abandoned children, But she also knew that those agencies were overwhelmed and underfunded, and that Lucy and Danny might be separated if they entered the system. The bond between the siblings was clearly the most important thing in their lives, and Margaret wasn't sure she had the right to risk breaking it, even with the best of intentions. Instead, she decided to take things one day at a time. She would feed them, keep them warm, and slowly earn their trust. Maybe, eventually, they would tell her more about their situation, and she could figure out how to help them properly. The next morning, Lucy and Danny were waiting by the back door when Margaret arrived at 5:15. Danny was practically vibrating with excitement, while Lucy maintained her careful composure, though Margaret could see the hope shining in her eyes. "Good morning," Margaret said cheerfully, unlocking the door. "Ready to help me make some magic?" Danny's face split into the widest grin Margaret had ever seen. "Yes. What do we do first?" Margaret put them to work on simple tasks. Danny helped her measure ingredients, his small hands carefully leveling cups of flour and sugar, while Margaret guided him. Lucy proved to have a natural instinct for the work, learning quickly how to knead bread dough and shape rolls with surprising skill. As they worked, Margaret learned more about their situation in small pieces. Their mother had died the previous winter from pneumonia. Their father had left when Danny was just 2, and they hadn't seen him since. They'd been living with their grandmother until she passed away 3 months ago. With no other relatives and no official guardians, they'd been surviving on their own, moving from place to place to avoid being caught by authorities who might separate them. "We tried staying at the shelter," Lucy explained as she carefully placed rolls on a baking sheet. "But they said Danny was too young to be there without a parent, and they wanted to call social services. I heard them talking about foster homes, maybe different ones, and I couldn't let that happen, so we left." Margaret's heart ached for these children who had lost so much and were fighting so hard to stay together. She began to understand the depth of Lucy's responsibility, how this 10-year-old girl had taken on the role of parent to her little brother, sacrificing her own childhood to keep him safe. Over the following weeks, the morning routine became as natural as breathing. Lucy and Danny would arrive before dawn, help with the baking, and share breakfast before the first customers arrived. Margaret taught them about different types of bread, how to recognize when pastries were perfectly baked, and the secret to making the flakiest croissants. Danny proved to have an exceptional palate for someone so young, able to detect subtle differences in flavors that surprised even Margaret. Lucy showed an aptitude for the business side, quickly learning how to calculate ingredient costs and portion sizes. But more importantly, Margaret watched as both children began to relax. Danny's laughter came more easily, and he started to play with the toys Margaret brought from home. Lucy's shoulders gradually lost their permanent hunch of tension, and she began to speak more freely about things other than survival. They still hadn't told anyone else about their living situation, and Margaret didn't push. She could see that they were sleeping rough, probably in abandoned buildings or hidden corners where they wouldn't be noticed. She started leaving blankets in the back room, claiming she kept them for cold mornings, and casually mentioning that anyone who needed to warm up was welcome to rest there. It was mid-November when everything changed. Margaret arrived at the bakery one morning to find Danny sitting alone by the back door, shivering and crying. Lucy was nowhere to be seen. "Danny, sweetie, what's wrong? Where's Lucy?" Danny threw himself into her arms, his small body shaking with sobs. "She's sick," he managed between hiccups. "She's really sick and she can't get up. And I tried to help her, but I don't know what to do. And she told me to come here because you would know what to do. But what if she dies like Mama did, and then I'll be all alone and Margaret's blood ran cold. She locked the bakery without a second thought and followed Danny through a maze of alleys and side streets to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Hidden behind a stack of old pallets was a small space that the children had made into a shelter, complete with cardboard flooring and tarps for walls. Lucy was curled up on a pile of blankets, her face flushed with fever and her breathing shallow and rapid. When she saw Margaret, she tried to sit up. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I told Danny not to bother you, but he got scared and—" "Shh," Margaret said, kneeling beside her and placing a cool hand on the girl's burning forehead. You did exactly right, Danny. Lucy, honey, we need to get you to a doctor. No, Lucy said, panic flaring in her eyes. No doctors. They'll ask questions, and they'll take Danny away, and I can't let that happen. I can't. She started to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her thin frame. Margaret gathered the girl into her arms, feeling how white she was, how fragile. Listen to me, Lucy. I promise you, I won't let anyone separate you and Danny. But you're very sick, and you need medicine. Do you trust me? Lucy looked up at her with eyes that were far too old and far too frightened for a child her age. After a long moment, she nodded. Margaret called her friend Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran a free clinic downtown. Sarah had always been discreet about her patients, and Margaret trusted her to treat Lucy without involving authorities unnecessarily. Within an hour, Sarah arrived at the warehouse with her medical bag and a concerned expression. Lucy had pneumonia, the same illness that had killed her mother. Sarah started her on antibiotics immediately and gave Margaret detailed instructions for care. They moved the children to Margaret's apartment above the bakery, settling them into the spare room that Margaret had been using for storage. For the next week, Margaret barely left Lucy's side. She monitored the girl's fever, made sure she took her medication, and spooned nourishing broth between her lips when Lucy was too weak to feed herself. Danny helped by reading stories aloud and bringing his sister cups of water, his young face serious with responsibility. During Lucy's recovery, Margaret had time to really observe the children's relationship. She watched as Danny instinctively knew when Lucy needed another blanket or when she was trying to hide discomfort. She saw how Lucy, even in her illness, worried constantly about her brother's well-being, asking about his meals and whether he was scared. On the 7th day, Lucy's fever finally broke. She woke up clear-eyed and hungry, asking immediately about Danny before anything else. Margaret brought her toast and tea, watching his color slowly return to the girl's pale cheeks. "Thank you," Lucy said quietly. "You saved my life." "You would have done the same for me," Margaret replied, and she meant it. In the short time she had known these children, they'd become as important to her as family. That evening, as they sat around Margaret's small kitchen table sharing dinner, Danny looked up from his soup and asked, "Margaret, can we stay here? For always, I mean?" Lucy immediately shushed him. "Danny, we can't ask things like that. Margaret has already done so much for us." But Margaret was already nodding. "Actually, I was hoping you'd want to stay. This place has been too quiet without you two." Lucy's spoon clattered into her bowl. "You mean it? Really and truly?" "Really and truly. In fact, I've been thinking. I need more help in the bakery, and you two are the best assistants I've ever had. How would you feel about becoming my official business partners?" Danny whooped with joy, but Lucy looked skeptical. "We're just kids. We can't be business partners." "Says who? You know more about baking than some adults I've met, and Danny has better taste buds than any food critic. Besides, I've been thinking about expanding the business. Maybe adding a lunch menu. I could use partners who understand what it's like to be really hungry, because they'll know how to make food that satisfies more than just appetite." End quote. Margaret had been planning this speech for days, but she still felt nervous as she watched Lucy's face. The girl had been hurt and disappointed so many times that hope was dangerous for her. Finally, Lucy smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "Partners," she said, testing the word. "I like the sound of that." The legal process of becoming the children's guardian took months, but Margaret's lawyer was skilled and patient. Dr. Kim provided medical records showing that the children were healthy and well cared for. Character witnesses lined up to testify about Margaret's suitability as a parent, and the children's obvious happiness in her care. During the waiting period, Lucy and Danny settled into their new life with remarkable adaptability. Lucy enrolled in school for the first time in months, quickly catching up on missed work with the help of tutors Margaret hired. Danny started kindergarten and made friends easily, his natural sweetness attracting both children and teachers. The bakery became a family business in truth. Lucy proved to have an entrepreneurial spirit, suggesting new recipes and ways to improve customer service. Danny became the unofficial taste tester and charm ambassador, winning over even the grumpiest customers with his infectious enthusiasm. Margaret watched them both flourish, in the security of knowing they had a permanent home. Lucy's wariness gradually faded, replaced by the confidence of a child who knew she was loved and protected. Danny's laughter filled the bakery every morning, a sound Margaret had never realized she needed until she heard it. The day the adoption papers were finalized was the happiest of Margaret's life. She had prepared a celebration dinner and invited Dr. Kim and a few close friends to mark the occasion. But the real celebration happened earlier, in the quiet moment when Lucy and Danny both called her Mom for the first time. A year later, Sunrise Bakery had become famous throughout the region for its exceptional bread and pastries, but more importantly, for its atmosphere of warmth and belonging. Lucy, now 11 and thriving in school, worked alongside Margaret every morning before classes, her natural talent for baking developing into genuine skill. Danny, at 5, could identify different types of flour by smell and had strong opinions about the proper ratio of chocolate chips to cookie dough. But the most remarkable change was in Margaret herself. She had thought her life was complete before Lucy and Danny came into it, but now she realized she had simply been going through the motions. The children had brought purpose and joy she hadn't known she was missing. The bakery's success allowed Margaret to hire additional staff, and she made a point of offering jobs to people who needed second chances, single parents struggling to make ends meet, and teenagers aging out of EMCRA. Foster care. The back room became an informal gathering place for people who needed more than just food, a place where stories were shared and connections were made. Lucy often helped with these informal counseling sessions, her own experience of loss and fear making her surprisingly wise for her age. She had a gift for listening and for helping people see possibilities they hadn't considered. Margaret watched with pride as her daughter, for that's what Lucy had become, developed into a young woman with both strength and compassion. Danny, meanwhile, brought joy to everyone he met. His enthusiasm was infectious, and his ability to find wonder in simple things reminded adults of what they had forgotten. Customers would often linger longer than necessary just to hear him describe the morning's baking process, or to see his face light up when he talked about a new recipe they were testing. On quiet afternoons, Margaret would sometimes think back to that first morning when she noticed a thin girl watching through her window. She wondered what would have happened if she had ignored the child, if she had been too busy or too self-absorbed to pay attention to someone else's need. The thought always made her grateful for the mysterious force that had brought them together. Whether it was fate, coincidence, or simply the natural pull of people who needed each other. She was thankful every day for the gift of becoming a mother to 2 children who had taught her more about love and resilience than she had ever imagined possible. The story of Lucy and Danny became local legend, inspiring other business owners to pay attention to the quiet needs around them. Several other restaurants and shops began programs to feed hungry children, creating a network of support that ensured no child in their town would have to collect crumbs from sidewalks to survive. Margaret kept the original newspaper clipping about their adoption framed in the bakery, not as a monument to her own goodness, but as a reminder that sometimes the most important moments begin with the simplest acts of noticing and caring. Above it, in Lucy's careful handwriting, was a sign that read, "Everyone deserves fresh bread and a warm welcome." As winter turned to spring and spring to summer, the bakery continued to thrive. Lucy learned to drive and began making deliveries to elderly customers who couldn't come to the store. Danny started a small garden behind the building, growing herbs and vegetables that they incorporated into their recipes. The family they had created wasn't traditional, but it was strong and loving, and exactly what all 3 of them needed. Margaret had learned that family isn't always about blood relations or legal documents. Sometimes it's about people who choose to love and care for each other, who create home wherever they are together. Every morning, as she unlocked the bakery door and breathed in the scent of rising dough and brewing coffee, Margaret remembered the scared, hungry children who had become her greatest blessing. She thought about the girl who had pressed her face against the window, watching other people eat, never imagining that she would soon be on the other side of that glass, surrounded by warmth and love and the promise of endless tomorrows filled with fresh bread and family laughter. The bakery's mission had expanded far beyond selling pastries. It had become a place where people learned that kindness could be as simple as sharing a meal, that paying attention to those who seemed invisible could change lives in ways no one expected. Margaret's small act of noticing a hungry child had rippled outward, creating waves of compassion that touched everyone who walked through their doors. And on quiet mornings, when the sun streamed through the windows and Lucy worked beside her while Danny sang off-key songs from his seat at the corner table, Margaret knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly the life she was meant to live. She had found her family in the most unexpected way, and they had all found home in the warm, yeast-scented embrace of Sunrise Bakery, where every day began with the promise of fresh starts and full hearts. 2 years passed like pages turning in a beloved book, each day bringing new chapters to their shared story. Lucy, now 13, had grown several inches and developed the confident stride of someone who knew her place in the world. Her academic excellence earned her a scholarship to the regional science fair, where she presented a project on the chemistry of bread making that impressed judges and secured her first-place honors. The trophy sat proudly on the bakery's counter, but Margaret treasured even more the way Lucy's eyes sparkled when she explained fermentation processes to curious customers. Danny, at 7, had become the unofficial mayor of their small section of Maple Street. His infectious personality drew neighbors from blocks away, and his weekly storytelling sessions in the bakery's corner had evolved into a community tradition. Local parents would bring their children specifically to hear Danny's animated tales, usually involving brave knights who defeated evil with the power of perfectly baked cookies, and princesses who saved kingdoms by sharing their bread with hungry dragons. The expansion Margaret had dreamed about became reality when the adjacent flower shop went up for sale. The integration of petals and pastries created a unique destination where customers could buy fresh flowers alongside artisanal breads. Lucy spearheaded the project, designing a layout that flowed seamlessly between floral arrangements and food displays. Her artistic eye, inherited perhaps from some unknown ancestor, transformed the space into something magical, where the scent of roses mingled with the aroma of cinnamon rolls. Danny's contribution came in the form of edible flower experiments. His fearless palate led to the discovery that violet petals enhanced the flavor of vanilla cupcakes, while lavender created an unexpectedly delicious partnership with lemon scones. Margaret watched with amazement as her youngest developed an intuitive understanding of flavor combinations that rivaled trained chefs twice his age. The success brought unexpected challenges. Food critics from the city began arriving unannounced, leading to featured articles in culinary magazines. The television producer approached about filming a documentary, fascinated by the story of the family bakery that had transformed a community. Margaret found herself overwhelmed by the attention, worried that fame might change the intimate atmosphere they had worked so hard to create. Lucy proved instrumental in navigating these new waters. Her natural diplomacy and surprising business acumen helped establish boundaries that protected their family time while still embracing opportunities for growth. She insisted on maintaining their morning ritual of working together before school, regardless of interviews or photo shoots. That sacred time remained theirs alone, the anchor of normalcy in an increasingly complex world. The documentary, when it finally aired, focused not on their commercial success, but on the relationships they had built. Cameras captured Mrs. Peterson teaching Danny chess while waiting for his morning muffin, and teenage employees learning life skills alongside baking techniques. The segment that moved viewers most showed Lucy helping a young mother calculate how to stretch her food budget, demonstrating the same careful resourcefulness she had once used to keep herself and Danny alive. Awards followed, including recognition from the state's Small Business Association and a humanitarian award from the local food bank. But the honor that meant most to Margaret came from an unexpected source. The principal of Danny and Lucy's school approached her about establishing a culinary arts program, with Margaret serving as coordinator and the bakery as a hands-on learning laboratory. The program launched the following fall with 12 high school students, many from situations similar to what Lucy and Danny had escaped. Margaret watched these teenagers discover that food could be more than sustenance. It could be art and science and healing all wrapped into one. Several students who had been written off as troublemakers found purpose and pride in creating something beautiful and nourishing. Lucy, Despite being younger than the program participants, became an informal mentor. Her story resonated with students who had faced their own adversities, and her matter-of-fact approach to overcoming obstacles inspired them to see possibilities beyond their current circumstances. She developed a particular connection with Maria, a 16-year-old whose parents worked multiple jobs to support a large family. Lucy taught Maria not just baking techniques, but budgeting skills and time management strategies that helped the older girl balance school, work, and family responsibilities. Danny's role in the program was less formal but equally important. His genuine excitement about each day's creations reminded the teenagers why they had fallen in love with cooking in the first place. His questions, innocent but insightful, often led to breakthrough moments where students discovered new techniques or flavor combinations. The program's success attracted attention from the state education department, leading to discussions about replicating the model in other communities. Margaret found herself invited to conferences and workshops, sharing their story with educators and business owners from across the region. The nervous baker who had once struggled to approach a hungry child was now speaking confidently to auditoriums full of professionals, advocating for innovative approaches to career education. During one particularly memorable presentation, Margaret was approached by Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a researcher studying the impact of experiential learning on student outcomes. Dr. Walsh had been following their program's development and was impressed by the comprehensive nature of their approach, which combined technical skills with life skills and emotional support. This meeting led to a partnership with the state university, transforming their informal program into an accredited curriculum that could be adopted by schools statewide. Lucy, now 14 and academically advanced beyond her years, was invited to participate in the curriculum development process. Her insights into what motivated struggling students proved invaluable in designing coursework that would engage rather than intimidate. The university partnership brought new resources, including access to commercial-grade equipment and connections with professional chefs who volunteered as guest instructors. It also brought research opportunities that fascinated Lucy, who had developed an interest in food science that extended far beyond simple baking chemistry. Danny, meanwhile, discovered his own passion for agricultural science through the herb garden he had started behind the bakery. What began as a few pots of basil had expanded into an impressive outdoor classroom where he experimented with companion planting and natural pest control methods. His success with heirloom vegetables led to partnerships with local restaurants eager to source unique produce grown by the enthusiastic young farmer. The garden became another teaching tool, with program participants learning about sustainable agriculture alongside culinary skills. Students who struggled with traditional academic subjects often excelled when learning through hands-on agricultural work. The connection between growing food and preparing it created a comprehensive understanding that enhanced both their cooking abilities and their appreciation for ingredients. Margaret watched all these developments with wonder and occasional anxiety. The simple life she had imagined when she first took in 2 hungry children had evolved into something complex and influential. Sometimes she worried that they were moving too fast, that success might corrupt the values that had brought them together in the first place. Her concerns were eased during a particularly challenging week when a kitchen fire forced them to close the bakery for repairs. Instead of viewing this as a disaster, Lucy and Danny immediately began planning alternative ways to serve their community. They organized pop-up baking sessions in the community center, turning the crisis into an opportunity to reach people who had never visited the bakery. Danny's suggestion to teach basic bread making to families facing food insecurity led to workshops that were so popular they continued even after the bakery reopened. Lucy developed simplified recipes and techniques that could be executed in home kitchens with basic equipment, making nutritious baking accessible to people with limited resources. These workshops evolved into a monthly program called Bread for Life, where families learned not just cooking skills but nutrition, education, and budget management. Margaret partnered with local social services to identify families who would benefit most from the program, creating a support network that extended far beyond food preparation. The success of Bread for Life caught the attention of federal grant administrators looking for innovative approaches to addressing food insecurity. The funding they received allowed Margaret to hire additional staff and expand programming to include job training components. Former program participants were hired as assistant instructors, creating career pathways while ensuring that the program maintained its authentic, peer-to-peer teaching approach. Lucy's 15th birthday marked another milestone when she was accepted into a prestigious summer internship program at the state's Culinary Institute. The opportunity would provide advanced training and exposure to professional kitchen environments, but it also meant spending 6 weeks away from home for the first time since the adoption. Margaret's initial reluctance to let Lucy go was overcome by her daughter's determination and maturity. Lucy had developed into a young woman capable of handling significant responsibility, and Margaret recognized that holding her back would serve no one's interests. The decision to support Lucy's independence marked another evolution in their relationship, from protector and protected to mutual supporters of each other's dreams. Danny's reaction to Lucy's temporary departure surprised everyone. Rather than feeling abandoned, he stepped up to take on additional responsibilities in the bakery and garden. His natural leadership abilities emerged as he guided younger children through simple baking projects and shared his agricultural knowledge with visiting school groups. The 6 weeks of Lucy's absence proved transformative for the entire family. Margaret discovered capabilities in Danny she hadn't recognized, while gaining confidence in her ability to support her children's individual paths without losing the bonds that held them together. Lucy's regular phone calls were filled with excitement about new techniques and ingredients, but also with homesickness that reminded them all how much they valued their daily connections. When Lucy returned from the internship, she brought with her new skills and perspectives that enriched their family business. Her exposure to professional kitchen management led to improved efficiency in their operations, while her study of international baking traditions introduced flavor profiles that attracted new customers seeking authentic cultural experiences. More importantly, Lucy's time away had solidified her commitment to the family business and community they had built together. She had seen other career paths and chosen to return home, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love for the work and relationships that defined her life. The fall of Lucy's sophomore year brought new challenges when Danny was diagnosed with a learning disability that explains some of his academic struggles. The diagnosis was initially frightening, evoking memories of their early years when any threat to their family's stability felt potentially catastrophic. Margaret's response demonstrated how much she had grown as a parent. Instead of panic, she approached the situation with research and advocacy, connecting with specialists and educators to develop strategies that would help Danny succeed. Lucy's support was equally mature, helping her brother understand that learning differently didn't mean learning less effectively. The diagnosis led to discoveries about Danny's exceptional abilities in areas not measured by traditional academic assessments. His spatial intelligence and pattern recognition skills were remarkably advanced, leading to innovative solutions for garden layout and efficient kitchen organization that impressed visiting professionals. Working with occupational therapists and educational specialists, Margaret and Lucy developed learning approaches that incorporated Danny's strengths while addressing his challenges. The bakery and garden became therapeutic environments where academic concepts were reinforced through hands-on activities that felt like play rather than work. Danny's struggles and successes became another teaching tool for the students in their programs. His openness about learning difficulties helped other young people understand that challenges didn't define limitations, they simply required different approaches to achieving goals. The year continued with recognition from the state legislature, where Margaret was honored for contributions to education and community development. The ceremony brought together representatives from all the communities that had implemented versions of their program, creating a network of educators and business owners committed to innovative approaches to youth development. Standing at the podium in the state capitol, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared baker who had once hesitated to approach a hungry child was now advocating for policy changes that would support similar programs across the state. The transformation felt surreal, but it also felt inevitable, as if every experience had been preparation for this larger purpose. Lucy and Danny accompanied her to the ceremony, dressed in their finest clothes, but still recognizably the children who ran through the bakery each morning with flour in their hair and joy in their voices. Their presence reminded Margaret that all the accolades and recognition were meaningful only because they supported the family and community that remained her highest priority. The speech Margaret delivered that day focused not on their achievements, but on the power of paying attention to overlooked needs and responding with practical compassion. She challenged the audience to notice the children pressing their faces against windows in their own communities, and to consider how simple acts of inclusion could create ripple effects that transformed entire neighborhoods. The standing ovation that followed felt like validation not just for their work, but for the choice to build their lives around values of service and connection, rather than personal advancement. Margaret knew that success measured in awards and recognition was temporary, but success measured in lives changed, and communities strengthened would endure long after she was gone. Returning home after the ceremony, they found the bakery decorated with congratulations, banners created by current and former program participants. The celebration that followed was more meaningful than any official recognition, filled with stories from young people whose lives had been touched by the programs and opportunities they had created together. As evening settled over Maple Street and the last celebrants headed home, Margaret stood in the quiet bakery surrounded by her children and the accumulated evidence of lives well lived. The space that had once been simply her workplace had become a hub of community activity, a place where individual dreams were nurtured and collective hopes were realized. Lucy and Danny helped clean up the celebration remnants, their easy conversation punctuated by laughter and affectionate teasing. Watching them work together, Margaret was struck by how naturally they had grown into their roles as community leaders, while remaining, fundamentally, the loving siblings she had first encountered outside her window. The future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities none of them could have imagined during those early days of uncertainty and fear. College applications and career decisions loomed for Lucy, while Danny faced the ongoing work of building academic skills while nurturing his unique talents. Margaret looked forward to supporting both journeys, while continuing to expand the programs that had become their shared legacy. But in that quiet moment, surrounded by the tools of their trade and the evidence of their impact, Margaret felt complete satisfaction with the path they had chosen together. They had created something beautiful and lasting, not through grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but through daily acts of noticing, caring, and responding to the needs they encountered with whatever resources they could. Marshall, the little girl who had once collected crumbs from sidewalks, was now helping others discover their own potential, while the boy who had waited by trees was growing into someone who would undoubtedly change his quarter of the world in ways yet to be imagined. And Margaret, who had thought her life complete before they arrived, continued learning that the capacity for love and impact grew stronger with each person welcomed into the circle of care they had created around Sunrise Bakery. The third year brought unexpected international recognition when a documentary crew from Europe arrived to film a feature about innovative approaches to social entrepreneurship. Their story had somehow traveled across oceans, inspiring similar programs in small communities from rural France to urban Germany. Margaret found herself participating in video conferences with business owners and educators from around the world, sharing techniques and learning about cultural adaptations of their model. Lucy, now 16, and fluent in 3 languages through her accelerated academic program, served as translator for many of these international exchanges. Her facility with communication extended beyond mere language skills to an intuitive understanding of cultural nuances that impressed seasoned diplomats. The girl who had once been too scared to speak to strangers was now facilitating conversations between continents. Danny's agricultural innovations caught the attention of university researchers studying sustainable farming techniques in urban environments. His experiments with vertical growing systems and companion planting had produced yields that challenged conventional wisdom about space limitations. At 9 years old, he was invited to present his findings at an international conference on urban agriculture, becoming the youngest speaker in the event's history. The conference presentation marked a turning point in Danny's relationship with academic learning. Surrounded by scientists and researchers who appreciated his unconventional approach to problem solving, he began to understand that his different way of processing information was an asset rather than a limitation. His confidence in traditional classroom settings improved dramatically as he learned to apply the same experimental mindset to subjects like mathematics and history. Margaret watched her youngest child bloom into someone who questioned everything with scientific curiosity while maintaining the joy and wonder that made him beloved by everyone he met. His presentation at the conference was filled with technical accuracy, but delivered with the enthusiasm of someone sharing exciting discoveries with friends. The standing ovation he received was as much for his infectious passion as for his innovative techniques. The international attention brought opportunities and challenges in equal measure. Publishers approached about writing a book, documenting their journey, while television producers suggested reality show concepts that would capitalize on their story's emotional appeal. Margaret found herself carefully navigating offers that promised significant financial rewards, but threatened to commercialize experiences that felt sacred to their family. Lucy proved instrumental in these decisions, demonstrating wisdom that belied her age in evaluating opportunities based on their alignment with family values, rather than their monetary potential. Her input led them to accept the book deal, while declining television offers, choosing to share their story in a format that would provide lasting value rather than temporary entertainment. The writing process became a family endeavor, with each member contributing perspectives on events they had experienced together. Margaret handled the narrative framework, while Lucy provided detailed analysis of program development and outcomes. Danny's contributions came in the form of illustrated margins filled with drawings and observations that captured the emotional essence of their journey in ways words alone could not convey. Working on the book together revealed aspects of their shared history that had never been explicitly discussed. Lucy wrote movingly about her fears during those early days, describing nights when she would lie awake, calculating how many more meals she could stretch from whatever food she had found. Danny's drawings showed memories Margaret hadn't realized he retained, including detailed sketches of the warehouse where they had lived and the precise arrangement of blankets that had been their shelter. These revelations deepened their understanding of each other, while highlighting the remarkable resilience that had carried them through their darkest period. Margaret gained new appreciation for the strength Lucy had demonstrated in keeping them together, while both children developed greater awareness of the courage their mother had shown in opening her life to two damaged strangers. The book's publication coincided with Danny's 10th birthday and Lucy's acceptance into an early admission program at the state university. The timing felt symbolic, marking both celebration of how far they had come and anticipation of new adventures ahead. The launch event at the bakery drew hundreds of supporters, including many of the young people whose lives had been touched by their programs. Lucy's decision to pursue a double major in food science and international development surprised no one who knew her well. Her academic advisor marveled at her ability to see connections between seemingly disparate fields, recognizing that her unconventional background had prepared her for innovative approaches to global challenges. Her thesis proposal on using culinary education to address food insecurity in developing nations earned enthusiastic support from faculty across multiple departments. The prospect of Lucy leading for university created mixed emotions throughout their extended family. Margaret felt pride in her daughter's achievements, alongside natural parental anxiety about launching a child into independence. Danny approached his sister's departure with typical optimism, already planning ways to document his agricultural experiments for her university research projects. Lucy herself seemed most concerned about maintaining her connection to the community programs that had become central to her identity. She negotiated an arrangement that would allow her to return monthly, to conduct workshops, and maintain relationships with current participants. Her commitment to staying involved demonstrated the depth of her attachment to the work they had built together. The summer before Lucy's departure brought a crisis that tested all their growth and resilience. A fire in the adjacent building damaged the bakery's expanded space, destroying equipment and threatening the viability of their educational programs. Insurance would cover basic repairs, but the specialized equipment needed for their teaching kitchen required resources beyond their immediate reach. Margaret's first instinct was to scale back their ambitions and focus on simple restoration of basic operations. But Lucy and Danny approached the setback as an opportunity for innovation rather than retreat. Their response revealed how thoroughly they had internalized the values of resilience and creative problem-solving that had defined their family journey. Danny suggested converting the garden space into a temporary outdoor teaching kitchen, using portable equipment and weather-resistant materials to create an environment that would actually enhance certain types of instruction. Lucy developed a fundraising campaign that emphasized community ownership of the rebuilding process, inviting supporters to contribute labor and expertise alongside financial resources. The rebuilding effort became a community celebration that strengthened bonds and demonstrated the depth of impact their work had created. Local contractors donated materials and expertise, while former program participants organized volunteer teams for painting and construction tasks. The new space that emerged from this collaborative effort was more functional and beautiful than what had been lost. Margaret observed this process with amazement and gratitude, recognizing that the true measure of their success lay not in buildings or equipment, but in the network of relationships they had nurtured. The fire had threatened their physical infrastructure, but it had revealed the unshakable foundation of community support that would sustain their work regardless of material challenges. The new teaching kitchen incorporated design innovations suggested by participants with various disabilities, making the space more accessible than its predecessor. Solar panels donated by a local energy company reduced operating costs while providing educational opportunities for students interested in sustainable technology. The garden expansion included greenhouse facilities that would allow year-round growing and extend the agricultural curriculum significantly. Lucy's departure for university occurred just as the renovated facilities reopened, creating a bittersweet transition that marked both endings and beginnings. Her farewell celebration drew alumni from every year of their programs, creating an intergenerational gathering that showcased the lasting impact of their educational approach. Margaret watched her daughter accept good wishes and advice from young adults who had been struggling teenagers when Lucy first began mentoring them. The pride she felt was tinged with wonder at seeing her child recognized as a leader and inspiration by people who had overcome significant challenges with Lucy's support. Danny's response to becoming temporarily the only child at home revealed dimensions of his personality that had been overshadowed by his sister's more dramatic presence. Without Lucy's protective intervention, he began advocating more directly for his own needs and interests, developing independence and assertiveness that would serve him well in future endeavors. The first months of Lucy's absence brought adjustments that ultimately strengthened the family unit. Margaret and Danny developed new traditions and deeper one-on-one connections, while Lucy's regular communications maintained her involvement in important decisions. Their relationship evolved from daily physical proximity to intentional emotional connection that transcended geographic distance. Lucy's university experience exceeded all expectations, with professors recognizing her unique perspective and encouraging her to pursue graduate studies that would position her for leadership in international development. Her freshman research project on cultural factors in nutrition education attracted attention from global organizations seeking innovative approaches to persistent challenges. Margaret received regular reports of Lucy's academic achievements alongside updates on her social adjustment to university life. Her daughter's letters revealed both excitement about new learning opportunities and homesickness for the daily rhythms of bakery life. The balance between growth and roots reflected the secure foundation that allowed Lucy to explore new territories while maintaining core connections. Danny's evolution during Lucy's first year away demonstrated his own readiness for increased responsibility and recognition. His agricultural work expanded to include consultation with urban planning committees, seeking advice on incorporating food production into development projects. At 11, he was advising municipal officials on policy decisions that would affect citywide nutrition and environmental sustainability. The consulting work led to Danny's involvement in a pilot program designed to create food production areas in low-income neighborhoods. His ability to explain complex ecological relationships in accessible terms made him an effective ambassador for sustainable agriculture among communities that had historically been excluded from bakery. Environmental movements. Margaret marveled at her son's natural diplomacy and his instinctive understanding of how to connect with people from all backgrounds. His genuine curiosity about different perspectives and his lack of condescension when sharing knowledge made him trusted by community members who were often suspicious of outside experts. The pilot program's success led to expansion throughout the city and recognition from state environmental agencies. Danny's role evolved from consultant to program coordinator, a position that required sophisticated organizational skills alongside his technical expertise. Margaret watched him grow into leadership responsibilities with the same grace and determination that had characterized his sister's development. The fourth year of their expanded operations brought opportunities to formalize many of the innovations they had developed through necessity and experimentation. Professional organizations began incorporating their techniques into official curricula, while government agencies sought their input on policy development related to experiential education and community-based social services. Margaret found herself testifying before legislative committees and serving on advisory boards for initiatives that would affect thousands of young people across the state. The nervous baker who had once struggled to approach a single hungry child was now influencing policy decisions that would shape educational opportunities for an entire generation. The irony was not lost on her that the platform for this influence had been built through the simple act of paying attention to individual need and responding with practical compassion. Every policy recommendation she made was grounded in specific memories of particular students whose lives had been changed through programs that treated them as whole people rather than problems to be solved. Lucy's sophomore year brought news of her selection for a prestigious study abroad program that would allow her to research food security initiatives in developing nations. The opportunity represented everything she had dreamed of pursuing, but it also meant another extended separation from home and family. This time, the decision-making process revealed how much their family dynamics had matured. Lucy's choice was supported enthusiastically by Margaret and Danny, who recognized that her global perspective would ultimately enhance her ability to contribute to their local community. Their confidence in maintaining connection across distance reflected the security of bonds that had been tested and proven unbreakable. Danny's reaction to news of Lucy's study abroad opportunity was characteristically generous and forward-thinking. He immediately began researching agricultural techniques from the regions she would visit, hoping to incorporate international approaches into his local projects. His global curiosity reflected Lucy's influence while demonstrating his own expanding worldview. The study abroad program took Lucy to 3 countries over 6 months, providing immersive experience in different approaches to addressing hunger and malnutrition. Her regular communications home included detailed observations about cultural factors in food production and distribution, insights that enriched discussions in their local programs and informed Margaret's, quote, policy recommendations. Margaret's pride in Lucy's international achievements was balanced by daily appreciation for Danny's continued presence and contributions. His steady growth in confidence and capability provided stability during a period that could have felt like family dissolution. Instead, it felt like natural expansion of their shared mission to serve others through practical applications of love and knowledge. The bakery's reputation continued to attract visitors from around the world, seeking to understand how a small family business had generated such significant community impact. Margaret developed guided tours that highlighted both practical techniques and underlying principles, creating learning experiences that visitors could adapt to their own contexts. These educational tours became another revenue stream that supported program expansion while spreading their model to new locations. Margaret carefully structured the visits to avoid disrupting daily operations while providing authentic insight into their approach. The international visitors often stayed to participate in regular programming, enriching the experience for local participants through exposure to different perspectives and cultures. Daddy's role in these tours revealed his natural teaching ability and his sophisticated understanding of the connections between individual stories and systemic change. His presentations combined technical information about sustainable agriculture with personal anecdotes that illustrated the human impact of their work. Visitors consistently rated his contributions as highlights of their learning experience. The success of the educational tours led to invitations for Margaret and Danny to travel internationally, sharing their story and techniques with communities facing similar challenges. These trips provided opportunities to learn from other innovative programs while building a global network of practitioners committed to community-based approaches to social change. Their first international consulting trip took them to a rural community in Central America, where local leaders were attempting to establish agricultural education programs similar to Danny's urban garden projects. The week-long visit included hands-on training alongside cultural exchange that broadened both Margaret's and Danny's understanding of different approaches to community development. Danny's ability to communicate across language barriers through demonstration and shared work impressed local farmers who became his teachers as well as his students. Margaret watched her son learn traditional techniques that predated modern agriculture while sharing innovations that could increase yields and sustainability. The mutual respect and learning that characterized these exchanges embodied the reciprocal approach that had always distinguished their work. The consulting experience confirmed Margaret's belief that their success came not from having all the answers, but from asking good questions and remaining open to learning from every person they encountered. This humility and curiosity had originally drawn Lucy and Danny to trust her, and it continued to be the foundation for all their relationships and programs. Returning home from the international trip, Margaret and Danny brought new techniques and perspectives that enhanced their existing programs while maintaining the core values that had always guided their work. The experience of being students in another culture reminded them of the vulnerability and courage required to learn new things, insights that improved their ability to support others facing similar challenges. The fifth year of their expanded operations brought recognition that felt both validating and overwhelming. Margaret was nominated for a national award recognizing innovative approaches to education and community development, while Danny received recognition from international environmental organizations for his contributions to sustainable agriculture research. Lucy's return from study abroad coincided with these honors, bringing the family together for celebrations that felt more meaningful because they had been earned through sustained commitment to service rather than pursuit of cash recognition. Her experiences in different countries had deepened her appreciation for the solid foundation they had built together, while expanding her vision of what might be possible through continued growth and learning. The awards ceremony provided an opportunity to reflect on the journey that had brought them from a small bakery serving individual customers to an internationally recognized model for community-based social change. Margaret's acceptance speech focused not on their achievements, but on the countless individuals who had contributed to their success through participation, support, and willingness to believe in the possibility of positive change. Standing at the podium with Lucy and Danny beside her, Margaret felt the weight of responsibility that came with recognition and platform. Their story would reach new audiences through media coverage of the awards, creating opportunities to influence even more communities while requiring careful stewardship of the message they shared with the world. The girl who had once pressed her face against a bakery window in desperate hunger was now helping to shape international conversations about food security and education. The boy who had waited by trees while his sister searched for sustenance was now consulted by policymakers seeking sustainable solutions to environmental challenges. And the baker who had simply noticed and responded to obvious need was now recognized as a leader in community-based approaches to social change. But beneath all the recognition and expansion, the daily rhythms that had sustained them continued unchanged. Margaret still arrived at the bakery before dawn to prepare fresh bread. Danny still tended his garden with the same enthusiasm he had shown as a small child. Lucy still returned home regularly to participate in the programs that had shaped her understanding of service and community. The core mission that had brought them together, creating spaces where hungry people could find nourishment and isolated people could find connection, remained the center around which all their other activities orbited. Success had not changed their fundamental commitment to noticing overlooked needs and responding with whatever resources they could mobilize. As Margaret locked the bakery door, after another day of serving customers, teaching students, and hosting visitors from around the world, she paused to appreciate the ordinary miracle of their shared life. The challenges ahead would be different from those they had already faced, but the foundation of love, resilience, and commitment to service that had carried them this far would continue to guide their next chapters. The future held university graduation for Lucy, high school for Danny, and continued growth for the programs that had become their shared legacy. But in that quiet moment, surrounded by the familiar scents of yeast and flour, Margaret felt complete satisfaction with the path they had chosen, and confidence in their ability to face whatever came next with the same spirit of practical compassion that had transformed 3 individual lives into a family dedicated to transforming their community and world. The 6th year brought unexpected challenges when economic downturns affected their region's employment rates, creating increased demand for their food assistance programs just as donations decreased. Margaret found herself navigating financial pressures that threatened the sustainability of their expanded operations, while maintaining their commitment to serving anyone who needed help. Lucy's junior year research project proved unexpectedly relevant to these challenges. Her study of economic resilience and food systems provided practical strategies for maintaining community nutrition programs during financial stress. Working remotely from university, she redesigned their resource allocation systems to maximize impact while minimizing waste, applying academic theories to real-world constraints. Danny's response to the economic pressures demonstrated remarkable maturity for a 12-year-old. He expanded his garden operations to focus on high nutrition, low-cost vegetables that could supplement the diets of families struggling with food insecurity. His calculations of nutritional value per square foot of growing space impressed economists studying sustainable resource management. The financial crisis forced Margaret to make difficult decisions about staffing and program scope, but it also revealed the depth of community support they had cultivated over years of service. Former program participants organized volunteer teams to maintain operations, while local businesses contributed materials and expertise to keep essential services running. A breakthrough came when Lucy's professor connected them with a foundation specializing in sustainable social enterprises. The grant application process required detailed documentation of their impact and methodology, work that revealed patterns and successes they hadn't fully recognized while focused on daily operations. The foundation's support allowed them to weather the economic downturn while implementing new efficiency measures that would strengthen their long-term sustainability. Margaret learned to view financial challenges as opportunities for innovation rather than threats to their mission, a perspective that influenced her approach to future obstacles. Danny's agricultural work attracted attention from researchers studying climate change adaptation in food production. His experiments with drought-resistant varieties and water conservation techniques provided valuable data for scientists developing strategies to maintain food security as weather patterns shifted. The climate research collaboration brought new funding sources and expanded Danny's role from local gardener to contributor to global environmental solutions. His ability to explain complex ecological relationships helped scientists communicate their findings to policymakers and community leaders seeking practical implementation strategies. Margaret watched her son develop into someone who could bridge the gap between scientific research and community application, translating academic discoveries into tools that ordinary people could use to improve their lives. His gift for making complex information accessible reminded her of Lucy's similar ability to connect different worlds through communication and understanding. Lucy's senior year brought decisions about graduate school and career direction that would shape her future contributions to their shared mission. Multiple universities offered full scholarships for doctoral programs, while international organizations extended invitations for fieldwork that would provide invaluable experience in global development. The decision-making process revealed how thoroughly Lucy had internalized the values of service and community connection that defined their family. Rather than choosing options based solely on prestige or advancement potential, she evaluated opportunities according to their alignment with her long-term goal of addressing food insecurity through innovative educational approaches. Her choice to pursue a PhD in sustainable development while maintaining active involvement in their local programs demonstrated the balance between personal growth and community commitment that had always characterized their family's approach to success. Margaret felt pride in Lucy's achievements alongside gratitude for her continued dedication to their shared work. Danny's entry into high school marked another transition in their family dynamics. His academic performance had improved dramatically as teachers learned to accommodate his learning style, while his confidence in social situations reflected the security of knowing his contributions were valued both at home and in the broader community. The high school years brought new opportunities for Danny to mentor younger students interested in environmental science and sustainable agriculture. His teaching style combined technical accuracy with infectious enthusiasm, creating learning experiences that inspired rather than intimidated students who might otherwise avoid science courses. Margaret observed Danny's natural ability to make every student feel capable of understanding and contributing to complex projects. His inclusive approach to education reflected lessons learned from his own struggles with traditional academic methods, transforming personal challenges into tools for helping others overcome similar obstacles. The seventh year brought international recognition when their model was selected for replication in 12 countries across 4 continents. The scaling process required development of training materials and protocols that could be adapted to different cultural contexts, while maintaining the core principles that made their approach effective. Lucy's graduate research focused specifically on these cultural adaptation challenges, studying how community-based food education programs could be modified to respect local traditions while achieving universal goals of nutrition security and youth development. Her work became the foundation for international implementation guidelines that preserve program integrity across diverse settings. Margaret found herself traveling extensively to support new program launches, sharing not just technical knowledge, but insights about the relationship building and community engagement that formed the heart of their success. These experiences deepened her appreciation for the universal human needs that transcended cultural differences. Dani's agricultural expertise became essential to international implementation, as programs in different climates required adaptation of growing techniques and crop selection. His ability to research and recommend appropriate varieties for each location demonstrated scientific rigor, combined with practical understanding of local conditions. The international expansion brought new funding sources that stabilized their finances, while creating obligations for ongoing support and quality monitoring that stretched their resources in different directions. Margaret learned to balance growth opportunities with maintenance of the relationships and standards that had earned them recognition in the first place. A significant milestone came when Lucy completed her master's thesis on community resilience through food education, research that was immediately adopted by international development agencies seeking evidence-based approaches to hunger reduction. Her academic achievements felt meaningful because they directly supported the practical work that remained her primary passion. Dani's 15th birthday coincided with his selection as the youngest participant in a national environmental leadership program that would provide advanced training in policy advocacy and scientific communication. The opportunity represented recognition of his unique combination of technical expertise and natural teaching ability. Margaret watched both her children grow into young adults whose individual talents complemented each other while serving their shared commitment to creating positive change. Lucy's research and analytical abilities provided the theoretical framework for innovations that Dani's practical experiments brought to life through hands-on demonstration. The program that had begun with 2 hungry children and 1 observant baker had evolved into an internationally recognized model that influenced policy decisions affecting millions of people. Yet the daily reality remained focused on individual relationships and local needs that required the same attention and care that had characterized their earliest interactions. Margaret's reflection on this growth revealed that their success came not from scaling up their operations, but from scaling deep their understanding of how to create meaningful connections between people with different resources and needs. Every expansion had maintained the personal touch that made participants feel valued rather than processed. The 8th year brought Lucy's graduation from her master's program and her acceptance into a doctoral program that would allow her to continue research while maintaining active involvement in program operations. Her dissertation proposal on culturally responsive food education approaches attracted multiple research grants that would fund both her studies and program expansion. Dani's high school years proved academically successful as teachers learned to appreciate his unconventional approaches to problem solving and his ability to see connections that others missed. His integration of agricultural science with social studies and economics created interdisciplinary projects that impressed educators seeking innovative curriculum approaches. Margaret's role evolved from direct service provider to strategic advisor, as the program she had initiated required less hands-on management and more coordination with external partners and funding sources. The transition felt natural rather than forced, reflecting her growth into leadership responsibilities she had never sought but was well equipped to handle. The bakery remained the physical and emotional center of their expanded operations, providing continuity and grounding that kept them connected to their original mission. Regular customers who had supported them from the beginning took pride in the international recognition, while appreciating that their daily interactions remained unchanged. Margaret continued rising before dawn to prepare fresh bread, finding in the familiar rhythms of kneading and baking the peace and clarity needed to navigate increasingly complex decisions about program direction and resource allocation. The meditative quality of bread making provided essential balance to the intellectual demands of strategic planning and policy development. Lucy's doctoral research took her to rural communities in Africa and Asia, where she studied traditional food systems and their integration with modern nutrition education approaches. Her communications helm included detailed observations about successful techniques that could be adapted for their international program implementations. The field research experiences deepened Lucy's appreciation for the wisdom embedded in traditional practices, while confirming her belief that effective development work required partnership rather than imposition of dull external solutions. Her academic writing reflected this respectful approach to cultural exchange, earning recognition from professors and practitioners alike. Danny's final years of high school brought opportunities to present his research at professional conferences where his youth and enthusiasm attracted attention from established scientists seeking fresh perspectives on persistent challenges. His presentations combined rigorous data analysis with accessible explanations that made complex concepts understandable to diverse audiences. The recognition Danny received from the scientific community validated Margaret's decision to support his unconventional educational path, while providing him with confidence to pursue ambitious goals for contributing to environmental solutions. His success demonstrated that learning differences could become competitive advantages when properly supported and channeled. Margaret's 9th year of expanded operations brought reflection on the journey that had transformed 3 lives struggling for survival into a family dedicated to helping others overcome similar challenges. The girl who had collected crumbs was now Dr. Lucy Chen, completing a dissertation that would influence international development policy for decades to come. The boy who had waited by trees was now Daniel Chen, a high school senior whose agricultural innovations were being studied by universities and implemented by communities around the world. His college applications attracted interest from prestigious institutions seeking students who combined academic excellence with demonstrated commitment to social change. Margaret herself had evolved from a small business owner focused on daily operations to a recognized expert in community-based approaches to education and social services. Her testimony before legislative committees influenced policy decisions affecting thousands of young people, while her international consulting work spread their model to communities facing challenges similar to those, they had overcome. Yet the core mission remained unchanged, creating spaces where people could find nourishment for both body and spirit, where individual talents could be recognized and developed, where community connections could flourish and strengthen. Every innovation and expansion served this fundamental purpose of helping people discover their own potential while contributing to the well-being of others. The success they had achieved felt both enormous and natural, the inevitable result of paying attention to immediate needs while maintaining vision for long-term change. Margaret's original decision to approach a hungry child watching through her window had created ripple effects that continued expanding across communities and continents. But perhaps the most meaningful measure of their success remained the simple fact that Lucy and Danny had grown into confident, capable young adults, whose concern for others grew from security in their own worth and belonging. The love that had healed their early trauma had become the foundation for lives dedicated to healing others facing similar struggles. As Margaret prepared for Lucy's doctoral defense and Danny's high school graduation, she felt anticipation for new chapters that would bring different challenges and opportunities, while maintaining the values and relationships that had sustained them through every previous transition. The future held promise for continued growth and impact that honored both their individual dreams and their shared commitment to service. The bakery's morning routine continued unchanged, fresh bread emerging from ovens that had witnessed countless conversations, tears, laughter, and celebrations. The sense of yeast and flour still drew people seeking both sustenance and connection, while the expanded programs provided pathways for those seeking purpose and community. Margaret's quiet satisfaction in this ordinary miracle of daily service reflected her understanding that the most profound changes often grew from the smallest gestures of attention and care. The girl pressing her face against the window had needed someone to notice and respond, just as countless others continued to need the same simple recognition of their worth and potential. The story that had begun with hunger and fear had become one of abundance and hope, not because circumstances had eliminated challenges, but because love and commitment had proven stronger than any obstacle they had encountered. Their journey continued with confidence that whatever lay ahead could be faced with the same spirit of practical compassion that had carried them this far.